Imagine you're sitting on your back porch, miles away from the nearest neighbor, staring into the dark tree line of the North Carolina wilderness. The sun has been down for hours, and the only sound is the wind through the pines. But then, out of the blackness, you hear a soft, humming melody. It's the exact lullaby your mother used to sing to you every night to help you sleep. Your heart skips a beat, but not because of nostalgia. It skips because your mother passed away 15 years ago, and that voice is coming from the top of a 60-foot oak tree where no human could possibly be standing. You realize with a jolt of pure adrenaline that whatever is singing to you isn't a memory, it's a predator that's been waiting 15 years for you to finally listen. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in storytelling format, then you have come to the right place. We post stories just like this one every single week. So, if that is of interest to you, please find the like button's favorite childhood teddy bear and replace its stuffing with angry, live hornets right before they go to bed. Before we get into the chilling details of today's story, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Today's story takes us to the jagged, fog-shrouded peaks of the Blue Ridge Mountains. This is a place where the forest is so old it feels like the trees are leaning in to hear you breathe, and the mist rolls through the valleys like a living thing. Our main character is a man named Elias. Elias was a carpenter, a man who worked with his hands and prided himself on his no-nonsense attitude. He didn't believe in ghosts, he didn't believe in cryptids, and he certainly didn't believe the local legends about the pale crawlers that supposedly stalked the Appalachian Hollows. After his mother died, he inherited her secluded cabin, the same place where he grew up, and he moved back in to fix it up and sell it. But in the spring of 2023, Elias realized that some inheritances come with things you can't see on a deed. The first week was normal, a lot of sanding floors and fixing leaky pipes, but by the second week, the atmosphere at the cabin shifted. It started with what we call an oppressive silence. Every bird, every cricket, and every rustle of the wind through the hemlock simply ceased to exist. It was a heavy, suffocating quiet that made Elias's ears ring with a deafening pressure. He began to feel a prickle on the back of his neck, the primal instinct that tells you you're being watched by something that doesn't have a name. One night, around 2 a.m., Elias was woken up by a sound that made his blood turn to ice. It was a hum, a soft, rhythmic lullaby coming from the woods just past his bedroom window. He recognized it instantly. It was a specific song his mother had made up just for him, a song no one else in the world knew. He sat bolt upright, his breath misting in the cold room. He grabbed his high-intensity flashlight and shined the beam out into the trees. The light sliced through the fog, and for a split second, he saw it. Perched on a thick branch high above the ground was a figure. It was taller than any person had a right to be, easily 9 feet tall, and so pale it looked like a streak of bone against the dark bark. Its skin was translucent, stretched so tight over its skeletal ribs that it looked like wet parchment. It had no lips, just a frozen, jagged grin, and eyes that were nothing but hollow, black pits of endless, starving hunger. The creature didn't run. It stayed perfectly still, staring back at him. And then it began to sing again. But it didn't use its own throat. It used his mother's voice. The pitch, the warmth, the slight southern drawl, it was a perfect, high-fidelity replica. Elias, honey, the voice whispered through the glass. It's so cold out here. Won't you let me in? Mommy's home. Elias felt a wave of pure, unadulterated terror. He realized then that this thing, this Wendigo, wasn't just a hunter. It was a mimic that had been harvesting his memories from the very air. It wasn't just after his life. It wanted to steal his peace. He spent the rest of the night barricaded in the hallway, clutching his grandfather's old shotgun, listening to the creature circle the cabin. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, its limbs snapping and clicking like breaking dry wood with every step. Every few minutes, It would scratch at the siding with fingers that sounded like they were 3 feet long. When the sun finally rose, Elias didn't pack his tools, he didn't lock the doors, he ran for his truck and pinned the throttle, driving until he was 3 states away. He never went back. He sold the cabin at a massive loss to a developer who wanted the land. But the story doesn't end there. The demolition crew went in a month later to tear the cabin down. They found the house completely empty, except for one thing. In the master bedroom, where Elias's mother had spent her final days, the crew found a perfect, intricate spiral made of thousands of human teeth, all of them polished to a shine. In the center of that spiral was Elias's old childhood music box, which had been missing for 20 years. When the foreman opened the music box, it didn't play the song it was supposed to. Instead, a voice came out of the tiny speakers, a voice that sounded exactly like Elias, sobbing and begging for his mother to come back. There is a theory on Reddit that the Wendigo doesn't just eat your flesh. It harvests the tethers of your soul, the sounds and memories that bind you to the world. It uses them to build a nest for the next victim. But the real, bone-chilling question is this. Elias is living in a high-rise apartment in Chicago now, miles away from any forest. But last night, he woke up to a sound coming from his baby monitor in the next room. He looked at the screen and saw a long, pale hand with skeletal fingers reaching into the crib, and then he heard his own voice coming through the monitor, singing that same lullaby to his newborn son. Imagine you were sitting in your deer stand, perched 15 feet above the forest floor, waiting for a prize buck to cross the clearing during the final hour of golden light. You scan the tree line with your binoculars, but instead of a deer, your lenses focus on a gap between 2 ancient oaks where you see a face. Not a human face, and not a mask, but a raw, wet skull wrapped in layers of glistening, muscle-red tissue that looks like it was freshly peeled. You realize with a jolt of pure adrenaline that the face doesn't have any skin, and as you watch, it opens a lipless mouth to mimic the exact sound of your own safety catch clicking off, even though your hands are shaking so hard you haven't even touched your rifle. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in storytelling format, then you have come to the right place. We post stories just like this one every single week. So if that is of interest to you, please find the like button's favorite pair of high-end hunting binoculars and smear them with thick, opaque red paint right before they head out for a trophy hunt in the deep wilderness. Before we get into the chilling details of today's story, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Today's story takes us to the dense, unforgiving wilderness of the North Maine woods, a massive stretch of commercial timberland where the logging roads are private, the cell service is non-existent, and the trees are so old they seem to remember things humanity has long forgotten. Our main character is a man named Garrett. Garrett was a veteran woodsman, the kind of guy who felt more at home in a canvas tent than a suburban living room. He was a meticulous hunter who respected the land, followed the seasons, and never spooked easily. But in November of 2019, Garrett saw something in those woods that made him realize he was no longer at the top of the food chain. Garrett had traveled nearly 40 miles past the last paved road to reach a remote valley he called the Deadwood Notch. He had a small, primitive cabin there, and he planned to spend the week tracking a legendary 12-point buck. The first few days were standard, cold, quiet, and filled with the scent of pine and wood smoke. But on the 4th afternoon, the atmosphere in the notch shifted. The wind, which had been howling through the canyons, suddenly died down to an oppressive silence. Every bird, every squirrel, and every rustling leaf simply ceased to exist. It was a heavy, suffocating quiet, the kind that makes you feel like the forest is holding its breath, waiting for a predator to strike. Garrett was sitting in his makeshift blind, a camouflage screen nestled between 2 boulders, when he felt a prickle on the back of his neck. He slowly turned his head, expecting to see a black bear or a coyote. Instead, he saw the face. It was peering out from behind a thicket of hemlocks about 50 yards away. Through his high-powered scope, Garrett saw a head that was impossibly elongated, with a jaw that seemed to hang too low. But the most horrifying part was the texture. There was no fur, no hair, and no skin. It looked like a biological diagram come to life, raw, red tendons and pulsing muscles exposed to the freezing air. It had no eyelids, just two milky, pale pits of endless, starving hunger that seemed to stare right through Garrett's soul. Garrett's heart didn't just beat, it slammed against his ribs. He watched as the creature moved, and it didn't walk. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, snapping and clicking like breaking bone with every step. It was easily 9 feet tall, its skeletal ribs pushing through the raw tissue of its chest. Garrett realized with a wave of cold nausea that this thing was a mimic. It wasn't just watching him, it was learning him. It began to make a sound, a low, rhythmic clicking that perfectly matched the beat of Garrett's own panicked heart. He didn't fire. Every instinct he had as a hunter told him that a bullet wouldn't stop this thing. It would only invite it closer. Garrett backed away, his boots crunching on the frozen leaves, never breaking eye contact with the lipless, grinning face in the trees. As he reached the edge of the clearing, the creature opened its mouth and, in Garrett's own voice, whispered, "I see you, Garrett. I can see your heart." Garrett turned and ran. He didn't pack his gear, he didn't grab his trophies, he just ran for his truck. He felt the creature right behind him, jumping through the branches with an agility that was physically impossible. Every time he stumbled, he heard a wet, guttural laugh that sounded like a serrated blade tearing through thick leather. He burst into the cabin, barricaded the door, and spent the night clutching his shotgun, listening to the sound of long, sharp fingernails dragging across the log walls, and his voice singing his favorite childhood song outside the window. When the sun finally rose, Garrett didn't wait. He pinned the throttle of his truck and drove until he hit the first town with a sheriff's office. Search and rescue teams later went back to the Deadwood Notch to retrieve his belongings. They found the cabin completely intact, but the interior was covered in a thick, translucent slime that smelled like copper and old earth. They found Garrett's rifle, but the barrel had been twisted into a perfect, intricate spiral, as if the metal had been soft as clay. There is a theory on Reddit that the Wendigo, the thing with the skinless face, doesn't just hunt for meat, it harvests the identity of its prey. It peels away the layers of who you are until there's nothing left but the raw, starving hunger it represents. But the real bone-chilling question is this. Garrett moved to the city and never stepped foot in a forest again. But last night, he woke up to a scratching sound on his bedroom door. He looked under the gap, and he saw a pair of long, pale fingers with no skin on them sliding a small piece of paper into the room. It was a photo of Garrett taken yesterday at the grocery store, and on the back, in Garrett's own handwriting, it said, "Your skin fits me better than yours."